A few years ago, when my daughter was a toddler, my wife and I used to take her to a nearby lake to picnic, swim, and just unwind. It was a peaceful spot, quiet, not too crowded, the kind of place where you could easily forget about the world for a while. One afternoon, after we'd finished eating, my wife decided to go for a quick swim while I stayed on the beach with our daughter. I watched her wade down into the water, the sun sparkling off the surface. A minute later, she suddenly stopped and turned to me, shouting something. At first, I couldn't make out what she was saying, but her expression was off. Then I heard her clearly. "I think I just stepped on someone's face." I froze for a second, thinking maybe she was joking, but the look on her face wasn't playful. It was pale, almost terrified. She quickly started making her way back to the shore, her legs moving faster, like she couldn't get out of the water fast enough. When she got back to me, she was visibly shaken. She said that while she was swimming, her foot brushed against something soft, and at first she thought it was a rock or a weird patch of seaweed. But when she pressed her foot down, she felt the unmistakable shape of a face beneath the water. A nose, an eye socket. She swore she felt the hollow of the eye. I considered going in to check it out, but something stopped me. The unease in my gut, maybe. We decided to pack up and leave right after that. The next day, the local news reported that a young boy who had been missing for days was found drowned in that same lake, not far from where we had been. He'd been there the whole time, just beneath the surface. To this day, my wife is convinced she stepped on his face. My friend and I are still trying to process exactly what we saw the other day. We've talked it through countless times trying to logically figure out how this was even possible. Hopefully someone on here can give us some thoughts and ideas as to what actually happened. So we recently purchased a small bass boat, and my first mate Lagav and I have been super eager to explore the lake and its islands, as well as learn the fishing around it. We're new to Tennessee. Yesterday on the 4th of July, we decided to go fishing in this very secluded part of the lake we named No Man's Land, because of the low-hanging bridge that prevents boaters from entering the section. My boat can make it underneath because of how small it is, but I've never seen another boat in there before. We decided to go deeper into the cove than we've ever been before. As we're slowly trolling down the lake, the path before us splits into 3 forks, and I ask which fork we should take. Lagav immediately says the middle one, so we continue straight as the water changes from a large lake to a narrow river-like path. This is where a chain of events happened in quick succession, and we've talked it through after the fact to try and recall the order of how this all went down. First, we heard a weird vocal-like noise coming from the woods beyond the shoreline. We both tensed up and felt very uneasy. "What was that?" Lagav asked. "A dog?" I said, as that was the first thing that came to my mind. "I don't think that was a dog," Lagav answered immediately. Then we saw a bird high above us perching on a branch, staring at us. "Maybe it was that bird," Lagav said. "Yeah, maybe," I answered. I'm not sure when it got into my hand, but at some point I drew my pistol and held it down at my side. Lagav held the fishing bow. We both had a very weird feeling as we drifted down the river, eyes glued to that bank. We came to a rotting pine tree that had fallen, and was now half submerged in the water, sitting on the shoreline. Then it happened. We hear a very loud, heavy-footed animal running through the woods, getting closer to the water. At first I thought it was a deer, as it was almost prancing, but as it got closer and louder, we both realized it was in fact not a deer. It was a very large, jet-black canine. My brain thought, oh, it must be a coyote, but this was much bigger, like a huge German shepherd, and it was fast, like a black shadow leaping through the trees and quickly approaching the bank that we were floating across from. It didn't seem to have any texture and details though, almost like it was flat and blurry. We couldn't see fur or its face and eyes, just the outline of its body and tall wolf-like ears, but it was obviously the body of a canine. Adrenaline started rushing through us, and my brain raced, thinking we were about to have to defend ourselves. It almost looked as if it was charging at us, but it was zigzagging and dodging through the trees toward the exact portion of shoreline we were floating past. We were scared, but the 15 feet of water between our boat and the shoreline gave us some confidence. It would have to swim out to us, and I didn't see that as likely. It continued its leaping through the woods and quickly reached our portion of the shoreline. In one majestic fluid motion, it leapt off the shore and dove into the water right under the half-submerged pine tree in front of us. That was it. We held our breath as we waited to hear it swim or move toward us. Small ripples reached our boat from the splash. After the fact, Legov swears the splash should have been much bigger for a creature that size. "Watch for it to come back up," I whispered. I had never heard of canines being able to submerge themselves under the water, but here it was happening right in front of our eyes. We waited. Nothing. Silence. Just the subtle sound of the ripples it made slowly dissipating. We waited about 20 more seconds and still nothing. It was almost as if the entire forest had shut off. Silence. Our eyes were glued to the fallen pine tree it dove under. "Maybe it's just standing in the water under the tree," Legov says. We get the courage to troll the boat a little closer to inspect the tree, but there's nothing. No sign of anything. At this point, we're in complete shock. Stunned. It's gone. How could it be gone? How does something that big just vanish, especially a huge creature like that? After 30 more seconds of silence, Legov breaks it with, "You saw what I saw, right?" A shiver flashes down my spine. "All of it," I reply. "Really though, what the fuck was that?" Legov said. I replied, "I think we saw a demon." We both nervously laughed. We stay floating near the shoreline in shock for at least another 10 minutes, hoping for a sign that we weren't crazy. Legov scoured the waters looking to see if it would come up for air, but it never did. How the hell could a big black wolf-like creature disappear into thin air, or water for that matter? Being skeptics, there has to be a logical explanation to what we saw, but we can't find one. If it had just splashed the water and gotten out again, 1, we would have seen it walk away in whatever direction, and 2, we would have heard it, as anything putting weight on the leaves makes a loud noise. But it was just silence, the loudest of silences. We live in Middle Tennessee if that helps at all. We're still a little shaken up by this. This is 100% true. We're not bullshitting you. Any insight would be much appreciated. So, there was this one park with a pond in the city that I grew up in. It had a nickname, Stalker Lake. I was young then, and this was before cell phones were common. I was a freshman in high school, and our track team went with the coach's instruction to meet and run around the path that circled the lake. It was located inside of a park in the city. It was about a mile in circumference, and I'm going to tell you right now that I was not the best runner on the team. In fact, I was pretty much the slowest, saddest girl on the track team. The coach warned us of the lake's reputation, even calling it Stalker Lake, and told us to go buddy up. I had no buddy. He did not enforce buddies, and I was soon left on my own after the runners took off. I ran. I tried my best. We were doing 3 loops. I saw people for the first loop, then was passed by people in the second loop. Then, by the third loop, my sides were aching and everyone on the team had lapped me and was gone. I was at the half-mile point, as far as you could get from the main road. The rest of the area on the far side of the loop around the lake led into more park. This included dense tree growth, brush, bushes, and just generally useless territory. You couldn't see into it well, you couldn't run past it. There was not a way to run through it safely. I got a stitch in my side. I stopped and started to walk. I pressed my hand into my side and must have been visibly tired because of what happened next. I heard a rustle behind me, and it was loud. Someone was coming out of the bushes. I started walking faster. Something in me told me not to look. I knew if I looked, it was over. I just knew. I sped up my walking, and they did too. Not more than a couple yards behind me. My heart was beating hard now. I started to run, and they started to run. I ran faster, and they ran faster. I could hear their footsteps right behind me, pounding into the pavement, almost catching up to me. Each time they would pull closer to me. I found the strength to push faster. My adrenaline pulled me forward, and I ran. I went into an all-out sprint and maintained it with the person on my heels for the remainder of the loop. I knew if I could just make it to the street, if I could just get back near people, I would be okay. I had to. I ran and I ran. I heard their breathing. They were that close to me. I didn't dare look. I knew if I saw his face, and I was sure it was a man from the sound of his breathing, that he would have to catch me because I could identify him. So I didn't look back. I just looked forward and ran. I reached the entrance to the path. I heard a wheeze behind me. I dug my heels and pushed myself forward. I heard another wheeze, then another. His footsteps stopped. He was gasping for air. I just kept running, letting the wheezing fall into the distance. I ran from there all the way back to my school without looking back. When I reached it, no one from the team was there. No one had waited for me. I got my stuff from my locker and walked home, shaking and terrified, but grateful. At the time, I lived with my grandmother. I think I would have reported it if I had been living with one of my parents, but I didn't want to scare her, so I kept it quiet. I wish I hadn't now. Now, I know the importance of reporting these things to prevent future incidents. To this day, that lake has a reputation, and nothing has been done about it. I feel very lucky for getting away. Lucky that I was fast enough, that the man was slow enough, that I knew to run and not look back. It occurred to me years later that this person was not only attempting to kidnap me, but that he was attempting to kidnap a child. I definitely looked like a child. I did not look mature for my age, and I was a young teen at the time. Now I carry my cell and pepper spray, no matter how crazy it makes me look. I also never run on paths. People look for targets on bike and running paths. I prefer to stick to nice crowded streets, no matter how gross other people think my sweaty running is. I recommend the same for everyone else. Also, shame on my coach. Don't tell your girls to run at Stalker Lake. And to the pedophile kidnapper, I hope that was an asthma attack and it got you, honestly. In the summer of 2022, I was desperate and frustrated. I had quit my job a few months prior in the pursuit of my own startup business, and wasn't exactly thriving. After 6 years of IVF treatment, my wife had blessed me with a daughter early that year, and while I was elated to be a father, the stress of being a dad, the financial pressures from the clinic, and the weight of being the sole provider for my family had taken a significant toll in recent months. As summer approached, I decided I needed a weekend away to clear my head and get back into the grind. I decided to take a 2-night trip, just me and our dogs, to a lake off an old logging road about 3 miles from home. It was one of my favorite spots, and I knew the woods there quite well. I packed my things, leashed the dogs, 2 blue heelers, and set out early one Tuesday morning. When I got to the trailhead, the parking lot was empty. It was the middle of the week, and I was stoked to be alone. There was a single deer path up a canyon about 1,200 feet over 5 miles to get to the lake, and neither myself nor the dogs met anyone else on the trail the entire way up the mountain. I got to the lake around midday and spent the afternoon fishing and collecting wood and water for the coming night. The lake was pristine and quiet, not a soul in sight. I was truly alone, aside from the dogs. I found a flat spot on the east side of the lake where the vegetation cleared, and I could set up a tent, and I made a small camp about 30 yards from the trail. I would have preferred to go further up the mountain, but it was still early in the season, and when I got to my campsite, the rest of the trail was still too snow-packed to continue any further. As it was, I had to navigate over several hard-packed embankments before I got to a suitable area. The icy slush was difficult to navigate, even for the dogs, and when we had finally crushed our way over and through a few hundred yards, I made the decision we would be going no further. I set up my tent, hung my pack on a limb, and took my fishing pole back the direction I had come. I spent the evening catching and cooking fish at the edge of the spillway, and as the sun began to set, the dogs and I made our way back to the tent. Slipping over the wet stumps and clumsily pushing our way through the snow, I stumbled into camp exhausted and ready for a fire. As I approached the site, though, I realized some things were out of place. My pack, which had been hung on a limb, was sitting neatly on the other side of the clearing about 20 feet from where I had left it. Sitting on top of it was a large eagle feather. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. The dogs began a low growl, but as they circled the site, there was no one there. As I approached my tent, a stick had been used to carve an inscription into the dirt outside the entrance. It was 2 U's, one upside down connected to the other by a thin line, and then further connected by another line to a larger U shape. I would describe it as a Native American petroglyph in the shape of a bird or an eagle. Uniform, symmetrical, and above all things, fresh. Someone had been here. Someone neither I nor very 2 distrusting dogs had seen, heard, or smelled. Someone who had left no footprints through the snow and mud. Someone who had not passed us on the trail, or whose car had been parked at the trailhead. My stomach dropped. I felt a presence of being watched, but I couldn't tell from where. I quickly built a huge campfire, and with dread, watched as the last of the sunlight sank beyond the ridge. That night was a fever dream. Pulling the dogs into the tent with me, I clung to my knife and flashlight, praying that whatever was watching me would leave. It didn't. Throughout the night, I was periodically awakened to a variety of sounds. Yells, shrieks, and snapping of branches. The dogs would sit up, growl, and bark until I would open the screen of the tent and shine my light into the forest. At one point, I had just drifted off to sleep when the dog's low growl woke me up again. Thinking I might have the drop on whatever this was, I slowly unzipped the tent and leaned out with my flashlight. Taking a deep breath, I clicked it on. Standing just 3 feet from me was a doe and her calf. I scanned across her. An entire herd was in the sight. As my dogs lost it, the deer spooked and sprinted back into the forest, a crushing and trampling noise as several dozen deer evacuated the area. As it faded, I heard laughter. The deep laughter of a man turned to crying as it escalated, then sobbing, and then to a deep growling, much more boisterous than anything my dogs could make, or even a bear would produce. I held the dogs tightly. Sleep eluded me for the rest of the night, and as soon as the sun peeked over the valley, I packed up my things and left. I've never been so terrified in my life. About 4 years ago, I was walking my dog around 9 or 10 p.m. It was the middle of summer, and the only time I could walk her was at night, so she wouldn't get too hot. My town is a very small suburb where nothing ever happens, and people are very friendly. I rarely saw anyone else when I was walking at night. In my town, there's a small lake surrounded by woods. There's a path that goes through the woods to lead around one side of the lake, and it brings you out to a big clearing on the other side that's used as a park. It had picnic tables and benches and lights on at night. You can see the clearing from the other side of the lake when you first go into the woods. My dog loved to walk on that path, so I decided to take her there. We get to the opening of the woods where the path starts, and my dog stops dead in her tracks. I tug on the leash a bit and tell her to come on, but she just won't move. She isn't sniffing anything. She's just standing there looking into the woods and looking scared. She had her ears back and her tail down. She did tend to get scared of little things, so I figured she heard a noise or something and was just overreacting. I kept trying to coax her in. She glances at me when I call her, but for the most part is frozen, staring at the woods. Finally, I get her to go forward several steps, very slowly, so we're a couple of feet from the entrance of the woods. Suddenly, she stops again. Now I'm getting a little annoyed with her. I look down at her and tell her to come on, and see that she's looking out towards the lake, again looking frightened. I follow her eyes. In the clearing on the other side, I can see a figure sitting on top of one of the picnic tables. It's not unusual to see other people at the lake, although I'd never seen anyone at night. The person I can see is dressed in all black, hood up, with his back to us. I'm fairly certain it's a man. I admit I get a little nervous, but I don't really see it as a big deal. It isn't that late, and other people like being out at night too. My dog was always very friendly and never afraid of people, so I'm wondering what's freaking her out. I decide to keep walking through the woods and then cut through an area a little way ahead where the trees aren't very dense to go home. I call my dog quietly, and she moves another several steps and we're in the middle of the clearing. It's pretty dark where we are, just a street lamp from behind us adding some dim light. My dog stops again and looks back towards the man, then quickly turns around and starts pulling to go back in the direction we came. She's very freaked out, tail tucked between her legs, ears back, and panting. I look back to the other side of the lake. The man is facing me. He still has his hood up, but I can see his face and he seems to be looking right at me. I look at him for a few seconds, then, getting scared, I turn back to leave the woods the way we came. My dog is pulling so hard I can barely hang on to the leash. She keeps trotting ahead of me until we're about a block away from the woods when she finally calms down. We keep going like this for a few minutes, when suddenly she gets the same panicked look on her face and turns and yanks me down a side street that's a shortcut to my house, going as fast as she can on the leash. I get an uneasy feeling, and I look back. There's a man, dressed in all black, hood up, on the street we came from, watching us. He's just standing there, almost casually, with his hands in his pockets on the street corner, and he's smiling slightly. I turn around and don't look back, and start jogging towards my house with my dog. I let her leash go when we get to the driveway, and she takes off running to the backyard. I still walked my dog at night after that, but never took her back to the lake except during the day. I had nightmares about that man for a while. It always unnerved me how quickly he had caught up to us. There are some shortcuts he could have taken to get to the other side of the lake without going all around the path, but he still made it there in approximately 5 minutes. He had to have run, and I'd never seen my dog so scared of a person, and never did since then. First, I must give some backstory. When I was younger, I worked for my lake community during the summer season for as long as I can remember. The jobs range from dishwasher, maintenance worker, and boat tender. My last job and longest one was beach security. The lake had a small beach with a building that had a game room, a deck overlooking the beach, a restaurant, a small motel, and a lobby for guests of the hotel and restaurant. I was assigned to check in guests of the beach and make sure that they were members in good standing who paid their community dues, and also to enforce the rules beset on the whole area. I would get a lot of flack from this job from Karens, crusty teens, and other idiots who were up for the summer. It came with all the drama that you would see on a CW teen drama show. This story took place during the summer and fall of 2011. I graduated college, and I promised myself that this would be the last year I would work for the community. I was tired of the drama, and I was ready to find a real job. To bank more money this year, I also took the position of doing night duty as beach security. For this, I would monitor the property for 3 more hours after the game room and restaurant closed at 11 p.m., and I would make sure that no one was trespassing on the property. I would mostly walk the property, and then stay in the lobby area, watch TV, and play on my Nintendo DS until my shift was over. 98% of the time it was come and go, but sometimes I would see the occasional deer, raccoon, fox, and black bear walk the deck. I would also have to ask people to leave, and or call community security for assistances. I should mention that I was an unarmed security guard, and I didn't own anything for self-defense. One night in July, I was watching Adult Swim on the TV with a sliding glass door behind me that led to the deck. The show that I was watching goes to commercial break, and the screen goes black. When that happens, I see on the reflection of the TV someone standing on the deck looking into the door and looking at me. I immediately jolted up and turned to the figure and just stared at him. This guy was about 5'8", wearing a dirty black hoodie with a white Adidas logo on it, navy blue basketball shorts, and white sneakers. With his hood up, I couldn't make out his face, but I can tell that he's a white male with bright red-dyed hair that was underneath his hood and seemed a bit younger than me at the time. He was just standing there, swaying slightly, and he had his hands in his pockets. He was staring at me, but also it felt like he was just looking through me. It took me a second to collect myself, and then I walked to the glass door and slid it open. "Hello, sir. I'm sorry, but the beach and deck are closed for the night. I have to ask you to leave the property and come back when we're open up in the morning." "When is that?" He was very monotone and seemed tired but jittery. "That would be 8 o'clock in the morning." "Okay. Can I come in and use the bathroom?" At this point, I felt something much more off about this guy. I've dealt with drunks and people being super high, but this guy just seemed to be on something else, and I didn't want any part of it. "Look, I'm sorry, but no one is allowed in here unless they're a guest of the hotel and restaurant, which are both closed for the night. Now, please, sir, can you please leave the beach?" He seemed to get a bit annoyed by that, but his body language barely changed. "Fine, I guess I'll go find somewhere else to shit." And then he walks off. I made it a point to follow him off the deck and watch him walk away to make sure he leaves. Instead of heading up the road, he veered off into the woods. He was out of my sight, but I could hear him dragging his feet through the brush and sticks. After that, I walked back into the lobby and locked the door behind me. I called the dispatch and reported the incident and asked to keep an eye out for the guy. 2 a.m. came, and I locked everything up, armed the security system, and left. I started to drive out of the beach area, and as I started to turn left, a balloon full of this red liquid stuff flew from the woods and slammed against my passenger window. I got startled and floored it out of there. I wasn't going to get out and see what happened, and I only lived 5 minutes from the beach. I got home and checked out the damage. My passenger door was covered in red paintball paint. The impact was enough to dent my door. I called it in and asked to keep their eyes out and check the area for the guy. The next day, I was told that they didn't see anybody there, but got reports of the same thing happening to other residents' cars and houses. I was pissed, but also unnerved that this happened to me in the first place. Time had passed, and it's fall. The beach closed for the season, but they still needed a night guard to make sure no one vandalized the property. It was the week of Halloween, and it was also my last night. I got another job working at a much better place, and this was my last of my 2-week notice. I also went to a Halloween party during the day, and went all out as Jason Voorhees with a machete from Walmart as well. I was wrapping up for the night, and I was just sitting outside of my car, talking my friend's ear off on my cell phone. As I was talking, I could hear some leaves rustling and twigs snapping in the woods behind the dumpster. I told my friend that I had to go, and I hung up. This was my quote, dumb white person in a horror movie moment. I walked slightly closer to where the noise was coming. It was dark, but slightly lit from the parking lot's lights. As I was looking, From behind the dumpster comes the same guy I saw in July. His hood was down, and I could see his hair was longer, with his natural brown hair roots longer than the red dye that was left. He began to fast walk up to me, growling, and his face was plastered with rage. He had a black iron pipe in his right hand, and he was swinging it a bit when he came to me. He covered a lot of ground quickly. I ran to my car and opened my back passenger door I was facing. I grabbed the machete I had brought to the party, and I raised it over my hand and stood my ground. I don't remember what I said to him. I was filled with so much adrenaline, but I know I cursed a lot. He seemed to stop and stood there for a bit. After I yelled and shook the machete a bit, he simply turned around and went back into the woods from where he came. As soon as he cleared the dumpster, I got the hell out of there. I was going way too fast for the windy roads my community had. I called not only security but the police as well. By the time they got there, he was nowhere to be seen again. 4 years later, I moved away from my community. I haven't heard anything new about the man or anything related to the incident. I now carry a knife, and I still have the same machete in my car, just in case. Yesterday I took my son fishing. He wanted to go to a nearby lake that we haven't been to in quite some time. It's not known to be a great area. For some background, the last time we went, about a year ago, a car drove by and screamed "nice ass" at me while I stood there with my young son. This kind of garbage behavior is unfortunately expected in the area. It's also known to be a late-night hookup spot as well as a late-night drug deal location. Due to the lake's reputation, I had made a deal with my dad that I wouldn't stay there past 4 p.m. without him. On to the story. My 12-year-old son, who looks much younger than he is, and I pulled up to our favorite fishing spot, a small pond on the opposite side of the road as the lake. Almost immediately, an older gentleman approached us asking if there were fish in the pond. I replied that we had just gotten started, so nothing yet, but that we had caught fish in the pond on plenty of other occasions. He thanked us for the information and returned to his spot on the other side of the road. About 15 minutes later, another younger man approaches the older man with a dog. I can see and hear them chatting, but they've made no move to involve us in their conversation, which I'm glad for. I just want to enjoy a day with my son. Unfortunately, the water in the pond was incredibly low and murky, and I can tell we weren't going to have any luck. I tell my son to pack it up, and we'll try another spot on the other side of the lake. As we begin packing our gear into the trunk, the younger man yells over, "Sorry if me and my dog and I ran you off." I tell him it's no problem, and we're simply moving to a better fishing spot. He then starts telling me how nice it is to see a mom taking her kid fishing, how you don't see that very often, etc. I get this a lot, so I'm pretty used to it. We have a short conversation about it as I pack up, and then I move towards the driver's side door to depart. Before I can leave, the younger man starts up another conversation, this time asking me how old I think he is. This feels strange to me, but I'm nice to a fault sometimes, so I answer his question. I tell him I'm a horrible judge of age, but maybe 25? He tells me that he's 38, and I'm too kind, and I laugh it off, saying something like, "I work with teenagers, so they always guess me well above my age just to be mean." He asks where I work, and I stupidly tell him my city. Turns out he lives there too, and starts going on and on about how he got a free apartment on such and such street because his baby mama kicked him out of their house. I think he's talking about some kind of government assistance program. Weird flex, but okay, man. At this point, I'm standing by the car door with my hand on the handle, and my son is already in the back seat. This guy can't take the hint and starts telling me all about his awful baby mama and how women are supposed to be submissive, quiet, and do what they're told. He specifically said, "I mean, it's cool that you can bait a hook or whatever, but you're still a woman." Now my alarm bells are blaring. This guy struck up a conversation by commending me for doing a typical dad thing with my kid. Now he's putting me down for the same thing. He's gone from being overly friendly and complimentary to agitated and ranting. I should have been rude and just got in the car and left, but I've unfortunately been conditioned, like many women, to be polite even when we're uncomfortable. Instead, I start making comments in the hopes he'll see me as not some weak, submissive woman who's going to agree with him. After all, I'm a tatted-up chick with an eyebrow piercing and 2 lip piercings. I don't exactly look like a little submissive housewife. I guess I was trying to make him just as uncomfortable as he made me in the hopes that he'd leave me alone. After he says women shouldn't be loud or opinionated, I tell him, "Oh, well, you wouldn't like me at all." He tries to backpedal, saying, I mean, it's okay to be loud, I guess, but don't try that with your man, you know." I say, "My man doesn't tell me shit. I do whatever I want." This kind of back and forth goes on for a while when he finally shakes his head and says, just don't understand what kind of women would act like that. I reply, a strong one. As soon as the words left my mouth, the older gentleman yells from his spot on the bank, "Yeah, say that again, honey." This distracted that creep long enough for me to hop in my car and lock the doors. I still don't feel safe, though. Unbeknownst to Creepazoid, only 2 of my car doors actually have functioning locks, but at least they're the 2 on his side. I put the key in the ignition and turn. No dice. Nothing. Of all the times for my car to act up, it chooses now. Panic now sets in. As I repeatedly try to start my car, I can see him out of the corner of my eye. He's taken notice of my car troubles and is trying to get my attention. As he takes a few steps towards my car, the engine finally roars to life and I peel it out of there. Only then do I let my composure crumble and have a long talk with my son about what just happened. To the older gentleman who took notice of my discomfort and provided a distraction, I'd gladly meet with you again any day. To the younger, misogynistic creep, I don't know if I was actually in any danger from you, but my gut said I was. Let's never meet again. Oh, and to my dad, I'll make you a new deal. I'm never going to that lake alone again, regardless of the time of day.